Hi, the problem with dot lights needs to be resolved. Alright, so in this video, we're going to fix the dot light issue in Vray for SketchUp once and for all. Let's go. So this is the SketchUp file shared by our student, Ajin. So let's go to scene 2, which is the scene they've set up. And let's run an interactive render. So let's go to Asset Editor, let's go to Settings. So this is the settings they're using. And let's click on Render with Vray Interactive. Alright, so you can see that there's a lot of noise in this render. Let's switch off all the lights and then sort of switch them on one by one. So it's definitely coming from the sphere light. So we need to fix the sphere light. You can see that there's a lot of noise and dots in the render from the sphere lights here. The sunlight is fine. It's not really affecting the render, and you can see that there's no dots here. And the environment light as well. So it's definitely coming from the sphere light. So let's check the sphere light. By the way, I was using the light mix render element to check the lights. You can simply add it from the render element here, and then it would show up in the Vray frame buffer. So you can notice that when I zoom into the sphere light, it is intersecting with the wall geometry. So all you need to do is sort of bring this down so that it's not intersecting the wall geometry, and do the same for the other lights as well. So I'm going to select all these sphere lights and then move them down. Let's check if this fixes the issue. So let's go to scene 2 and run an interactive render. We need to switch on all the lights. So you can see that it's better than before, but it's a little too bright. And you can see the reason behind that is because our student is given value of 100 for each of these lights here. So I'm going to just right click on the dial to bring them back to 1. So now you can see that we got rid of the dotted issue in the render. There's still few dots here, and that's because Vray is finding it difficult to calculate the light bounce. So first thing what we need to do to improve this render, I'm going to improve this render now. We sort of fix the dot issue by reducing the intensity here in the light mix and also making sure it's not intersecting with the SketchUp geometry. So now to improve this render, I'm going to adjust the render a bit. So let's go to our Asset Editor first. And let's go to sphere light and change this to invisible so that the source is not seen. And I'm also going to go to light mix and I'm going to group by instances because I want to adjust the sphere lights together. You can see that we have some sphere lights here as well. So we'll have to adjust these as well. So let's move them in place. You can keep it inside, but make sure it's not intersecting any geometry. It's also a good idea to group these lights together so that when you select one, you can select the rest of them. So I'm going to group them together. And it's a good idea to also assign tags to these lights. So make sure you get in the habit of using tags so that it's easier to edit your lights, models, and materials. Alright, so this is a lamp light and that's the ceiling light. Let's rename these lights. So you can rename this. Call this lamp light. This is the ceiling light. Also get into the habit of renaming your lights. Alright, so now let's run an interactive render. Alright, great. And now you can see that we have very few lights here as well. So you can adjust them together. So this is our lamp light, this is our ceiling light, then we have the sunlight, the environment light, and the other lights. Alright, so now to improve this render, the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a floor so that light bounces off from this floor. So I'm just going to add a floor like this, or it's a good idea to add an infinity plane as well. So let me just open Vray objects and then add an infinite plane. So let's add it here. Sometimes when you add it to this side, it's been added, but because the section plane is activated, you'll have to deactivate the section plane and then you can see your Vray infinite plane. So let's place it here, and also important step is to make sure it is at the bottom of the slab because then it would not intersect with the floor. So let's just move it down by 200 mm. Alright, and let's check our section settings as well because I could see that there was sunlight falling into the space from this side. So let's go back to scene 2 where the section is activated, and let's check the section settings. So let's go to section 2. Let's go to options. And so let's make sure we switch off the lights, effect light. So this way the light would be clipped and you'll get natural lighting from the other sides of the room. So let's go back to scene 2 and run an interactive render. Alright, so now you can see that the sunlight is not entering from this side. Now if you want to change the sunlight position, then you can use the Solar North plugin. So I'm just going to switch on shadows, view shadows. You can see that the sunlight is falling from this side, but since there is a wall, it's going to block that light. So what I will do is, I'll go to scenes, I'll go to shadows. I can either change the north angle using the Solar North plugin, which you can find in my other video as well, or you can simply change the time of the day. So this should suffice, which is around 8:23. So let's go back to scene 2. You can see that it changes back to 1:30. So let's change that to around 9 or 8:30. Alright, so now let's update the scene and run an interactive render. Alright, so now you can see we have some nice sunlight coming into the space as well. Now, for your downlight here, I would not recommend using sphere lights. You can rather use a rectangular light and change it to circular. So I'm going to delete these sphere lights. So let's enter the group, select these sphere lights here, delete them. And then what I would do is, now it's also a good idea to sort of group these downlights together as separate objects. I'm going to group them as separate entities from the group. Make sure they're not part of the same group, because then it would be more difficult to edit these. And what I'll also do is make this a component. So I'll make this a component and call this downlight. So now if I copy this, let's copy this here, then multiply by 2. So let's select all these lights, group them together. Alright, so now we have 3 components. So if I edit one, you can see that it edits the others as well. So that's why I use components a lot. And then we can sort of delete these extra groups. Don't need them. Similarly, these as well. And then copy it to the other side. Alright, great. And then of course you would also need to adjust this. So I don't know what kind of a downlight this is, but let me just move this down. So now it looks like a better downlight. And then what I would do is I would place a rectangle light here. So I would enter the component and then let me switch on the Vray lights toolbar and then place a light here. It's also a good idea to change this to a circular light. So let's go to the light settings. This is a rectangular light. You can just change the shape from rectangle to disc. So that would make it circular, and then you can scale it to the edges. So now you can see, since it's a component, it gets added to all the other downlights as well. Alright, so now if I go back to scene 2 and run an interactive render, you can see that the light shows up properly and it looks like a downlight as well. So if I switch off all the lights and just switch on the rectangle light, you can see that it comes in properly. It gets rid of that dotted issue in your space as well. Now the dotted issue generally happens when you place a light inside a material and it is reflecting that material's properties on the other surfaces. So it's important to adjust all your materials as well. So now we'll adjust our materials. And a quick tip what I would give is, you can see that the shadows edges are pretty sharp. So if you want to make it softer, you can just go to the sunlight settings and increase the size multiplier. So if I make this 10 and now run an interactive render, just notice the edges, it becomes softer. So that's a quick tip. Alright, so now we need to adjust the materials so that it reflects the right materials in the space. So let's start with this wood here. Alright, so now you can see that the wood is not reading the material properly, and that's because we have this yellow symbol here. So I've lost the texture when the students shared the SketchUp file. So always when you guys share projects, just go to extensions, Vray, and click on pack project. It'll pack as a zip file, and make sure to share the zip file and not the SketchUp file. So in the zip file, it would contain all the textures and the SketchUp file as well. So do this before you share your models. Okay, so now let's use a different material. So I'll select a material from Chaos Cosmos. You would need an active internet connection to use Chaos Cosmos. Okay, let's go to home, and then you can see in the bottom here, we have some materials. So let's just add some materials quickly. Wood M, and then import this in. So we can download the material from the category here, wood, and then import it. So you can see it gets imported as wood M. Now all you need to do is go to asset editor, search for wood. You can see that we've imported twice. You can select the first material, and then you can apply it on this component. And this again is a mistake because you can see that's not a component, so I need to apply on these individually. So always get in the habit of using components because it makes your life easier when modeling in SketchUp. Components and tags and groups is your savior when modeling in SketchUp. Let's just check this material. You can see that it's not reading this material as well. So I'm going to just use some blank material. So let's go to wood flooring. Download this, import it, select wood tiles, then apply it on the floor. You can see that there are two faces here. So let's see what's the problem. So we have one group here, which is the actual floor. So let's apply it on this. And if you want to rotate it, you can just go to right click on the texture position, and then use the green pen to rotate it. You can also increase the size. Click on right click, done. Now there are two groups here. So let me hide this. Let me just delete this. Let's see hidden geometry, hidden objects. Right, so we have our hidden objects. So right click on that, enter the group, right click and click on unhide. Now we have a group, and yeah, now I think it is not intersecting with any face. Okay, let's see our progress so far. So let's go to scene 2. And let's check our ceiling material as well. It's using the default, which is fine. But I would highly recommend you guys using another grayish material for your ceilings, walls, and so on. Now let's just place some trees quickly to add some shadow effects in the space. Let's go to Chaos Cosmos, 3D models. I also have some favorites which I generally use. So I'm going to use this Persian ironwood. Just place it a bit away so it casts some shadows. Let's see if there's any other. Let's place this on the other side. It's also a good idea to change the material of the infinite plane. So let's add some grass. So let's go to Chaos Cosmos, go to materials, ground, and let's add some grass here. The simple green grass should work. And if you want to apply it, I would highly recommend, let's go to toolbars and switch on Vray utilities. I would highly recommend you guys switch on solids for this infinite plane. So all you need to do is come here and click on enable solid widgets. Now, so I can now see what I will be applying on the infinite plane as well. So you see that face there. And now if I go to my asset editor, go to materials, search for grass, use this grass material, and then apply it on the infinite plane. So now let's go to scene 2 and run an interactive render and see the progress that we made so far. We need to switch on all the lights as well. So this is far better than the previous render. You can see that this material looks really nice. So try to use Chaos Cosmos materials as much as you can. Alright, great. So it's looking good so far. So let's just add some more objects around the scene. Adjust the materials as much as I can and improve this render. So I will be doing a time lapse from here on out because the video is getting a little too long. And you can watch the time lapse and see how I will improve this render.